So after having several earlier conversations about Tenet and breaking down the very complex car chase section of the film, and the first time we really experience inversion with Sator going back and the way Catherine is dragged forwards through the scene by an inverted person, all that is very confusing. And I've tried my best to make sure that these videos and explanations and what we covered on the podcast proper. Check that out, Cinphomaniac. I've tried to make sure that it all coheres, and I know I made some mistakes before, so I made corrections to that, but I thought maybe the best explainer I could give everybody is to walk through the complete timeline of that section of the movie from each of the major points of view. And the reason you need to separate it by point of view is to illustrate how it's different from the inverted or non-inverted perspective, and when each character goes inverted and how they interact with the inverted or non-inverted. And, one could collate all this into one singular timeline in chronological order, but believe it or not, I find that would be more confusing. So we're going to go through point of view, and we're going to start with arguably one of the more confusing ones, which is Sator's point of view. Before I break that down, I just wanted to clarify something else about how we're doing this timeline. We're going to use time increments, and that timeline in increments is 1 to 115 to 130 to 145 to 2 to 205. Now, this isn't a precise timeline. I'm not saying that each of these events have 15 minutes apart or 5 minutes in the case of 2 to 205. How much time is a little bit unclear, and it tends to be quite uneven between the events of each of these. And some of the events I'm going to recount basically take up the entirety of that time, whereas others, there's technically gaps. But it's just a simple way to track progression, or progression in a different direction, I suppose. In the case of inverted, instead of going from 1 to 115, it's going 115 to 1. And that's how we're going to do the points of view. Once a character goes inverted, we will give that same time as the time inverted in their blue version, and then start to count backwards. And that's another thing we're going to do. We're going to label characters either red or blue. Red means they are non-inverted, meaning normal, progressing forwards in time. Blue means they are inverted. So every time, for example, I want to call Sator red Sator, and inverted Sator blue Sator, and cat red cat, inverted cat blue cat. Protagonist red protagonist, and blue protagonist for the inverted version. And same thing with ancillary characters like Sator's men and the different groups, because he has reds and blues working together as part of the whole temporal pincer strategy. Now, let's start with Sator and his timeline. So from Sator's point of view, at 1 o'clock, red Sator assaults red cat. He then goes to hide and wait the hour out. So he's hiding that whole hour. Then he reappears at 2. At 2, red Sator emerges from this hiding spot and confronts the captured red protagonist, then inverts via turnstile. At 2, blue Sator exits turnstile, unshoots red cat, then drags her to the Audi with the blue driver. So you can see outside there's a blue driver, a driver in an Audi. Sator drags cat out to that driver. At 1:45, blue Sator loses red cat, while red protagonist reverses out of the red antags team's capture. So think of it this way, because this is from Sator's point of view and he's inverted, forwards moving things look like they're moving backwards, and cause and effect moves that way as well. The red protagonist reverses out of the red antags team. That's what I'm talking about. That's what it would look like from Sator's point of view. And Kat escaping him would just look like her just moving away from him backwards, etc. At 1:30, blue Sator jumps into a moving car with red cat in it, then makes the handoff for the 241 with cat in the car. Remember, I'm speaking from the reversed point of view. Blue Sator jumps out into that moving car with cat, then makes the handoff for the 241 with Kat in the car while he's holding her hostage. Next, at 1:15, Blue Sator brings Red Cat to the red Antag Mercedes, then approaches the crash Saab with the blue Protagonist, then lights the gasoline, causing an inverted explosion, and then departs in the Audi with the blue driver. That last part is not explicitly seen. Then at 1, Blue Sator is headed further and further into the past in the Audi with the blue driver. And that's the past that takes him all the way to the boat in Vietnam a week earlier. Now let's go to Kat's point of view, which is arguably the most confusing or certainly the most confusing for me, as this is what caused me the most issues where I had to make corrections and etc. But I think we have it all sorted out here, and this is the best way to make sense of it. At 1, Red Cat is assaulted by Red Sator. She is then taken into the red antagonist Mercedes. They depart. At 1:15, Red Cat is dragged from the red antagonist Mercedes, which is now way down the highway, by Blue Sator and pulled into the Audi with the inverted driver, which reverse drives back up the highway towards the turnstile. Then at 1:30, Red Cat is held by Blue Sator while he makes a handoff for the 241. Blue Sator then jumps out of the moving car, leaving Red Cat to crash, but Red Protagonist stops the car and saves her. At 1:45, Red Cat is recaptured by Blue Sator, while Sator's red antagonist team takes the Protagonist hostage. At 2, Red Cat is held by Blue Sator on the blue side of the turnstile, then shot with an inverted round that passes through her gut from the window and is caught inside Blue Sator's gun. She is then left to die as Blue Sator backs up into the turnstile and disappears. At 2:05, Red Cat, injured and on a stretcher, is then brought into the red side of the turnstile by Red Protagonist and Red Neil, and then inverted. At 2:05, Blue Cat is cared for by Blue Neil as they prepare to head through the pass to Oslo. And note that she does not become inverted until after the entire car chase sequence plays out. And there's only one cat through that entire car chase sequence. That's the inverted cat is then moving back in the time at the same time, but she does not intersect with that car chase at all. Lastly, the simplest point of view, which is more or less the point of view we see play out directly in the film, which is the protagonist's point of view / Neil's point of view. At 1, the red protagonist prepares to heist the 241. At 1:15, the red protagonist completes the heist of the 241 and escapes onto the highway. At 1:30, the red protagonist makes handoff for the 241 with Blue Sator, who's holding Red Cat hostage. Then Blue Sator jumps out of the moving car, leaving Red Cat to crash, but red protagonist stops car and saves her. At 1:45, red protagonist is captured by the red antagonist team, while Red Cat is recaptured by Blue Sator. At 2, Red Protagonist watches Blue Sator shoot Red Cat with an inverted round. Red Sator emerges, confronts captured Red Protagonist, while at the same time he watches Red Cat be left to die as both Blue Sator and Red Sator enter the turnstile and disappear. At 2:05, Red Protagonist and Red Neil take injured Red Cat, who is on the stretcher, into the turnstile and they all invert. At 2:05, Blue Protagonist leaves Blue Neil and Blue Cat behind so that he can chase after Blue Sator through the past and drives off in the Saab. At 1:03, Blue Protagonist attempts to thwart the handoff in the Saab but crashes. And at 1:15, Blue Protagonist in a crash Saab watches Blue Sator light gasoline, causing an inverted explosion, though Blue Protagonist survives and is rescued by Blue Neil and TENET. At 1, Blue Protagonist is unconscious, traveling into the past towards Oslo with Blue Neil and Blue Cat. And that is the completed timeline from the protagonist's perspective, which rounds out all 3 perspectives and their different ways of moving through the sequence between going inverted and non-inverted, and the way interacting with the inverted affects their sort of cause and effect. And I think the most interesting thing to note, because we don't quite see it, is that Cat is taken from that assault, brought down the highway, where she meets Blue Sator, who is at the end of his timeline from his perspective. He's about to escape into the past, and he grabs her, brings her back to the car, brings her all the way back to the turnstile, which is the point when he first exited the turnstile on the inverted side, and finds a already shot cat and essentially unshoots her. But that you have to remember, Sator, once he goes to the blue, is the same Sator who was the red Sator, who was listening to everything that not only his red team did, but his blue team did. So he already knows the cat's shot, and he shot her, so he redoes it. He already knows that he has to drag Cat into the car to make that handoff. He already knows that he's going to be picking up Cat on the end of his trip before he escapes. And that's how this whole thing goes. He already knows all that. That's the whole temporal pincer part of it. And that concludes understanding the timeline of one of the most confusing sequences in a very confusing movie. But I hope it's not confusing to you anymore. This is Marcus with Cinphomaniac. Please like and subscribe to our channel. And definitely check us out on all the popular podcast services, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it. And please listen and watch for more Tenet and more Cinphomaniac.